You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Would you ever go on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Would I go on? So what, am I invited with no strings attached?
Yeah, you're so suspicious. Yeah, you're a contestant. You've been invited to come on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire to compete for the $1 million cash prize.
Why would I say no? What's the catch here?
I'm just, some people don't want to go on live television or reality television or game shows or anything like that. So I just thought I'd ask,
Yeah, but those people are crazy because you just said Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I wouldn't mind being a millionaire.
I think with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, for inflation, it really should be a lot more.
It's like the Dr. Evil, like, who wants to be a billionaire? It's the pinky.
Yeah. Like 15 questions, right? And it's like, with inflation, I feel like it should be like 4.5, 5 million. But anyway, I asked this because episode 96 of Arsenal Pass, Brendan, we are doing a community mailbag. We are diving into some questions, and we have a lot of questions. We have some amazing questions from our community Discord. We have some questions from Twitter, from putting out the feels on Twitter in just 2 days. We've got over 40 questions that we're going to try and get through and power through, because there's some questions I think are going to be a lot shorter. There's some questions that are going to be longer form discussion, some questions that we've probably answered in the past. And I think there's even some, we'll get some duplicates, I'm sure, during this kind of, this questionnaire, this community mailbag effectively. I didn't read through all of them, I'll be honest, beforehand. I just thought we could just get into it and do it, to be honest, because that's the kind of people we are, Brendan. We're doers. So,
yeah, fully scripted content. We never get caught off guard. Yeah,
exactly. Thousands of edits.
Paid actors.
Exactly. Whoa, don't be telling everyone about that. All right, episode 96. Community questions answered. No news, no command and cookout question this week. We're just getting straight into it, Brendan. So, are you ready to dive straight into the mailbag and answer our first questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we're going to start with a question from Arsenal Pass, well-known Scott Howling Minds, who's been on the channel before, who also does thumbnails for us. And Howling Minds asks, or Howling Minds on Twitter says, following the recent acknowledgement of the bond between a player and a legendary when discussing Crown of Seeds ban, do you feel Flesh and Blood needs to depower legendaries to prevent a trend of having to ban around the problem? Start with a spicy one, Brendan.
Oh, well, yes. So I think they shouldn't be afraid. And there's probably some people that listen to this pod, and whenever I say Marvel Snap, they're like, grr! It's just like their bingo angry card. But I just want to bring this up because it's also an issue in that game as well. It's like they're having an issue with basically like the cards they release every month for the $10 season pass have been really powerful. And there's this trade-off. It's like, can you nerf it? Because if you nerf it, it's like the people who got it and paid for it, it's like just feels really pay to win. But if they don't do it, it's like very unhealthy for the game. I think Fab is in a similar scenario where like these legendaries they're up until now, they're kind of seen as untouchable, and I don't think they should be. Can you make the game balanced and okay by banning things around the legendary, like we've seen with the old him ban? Yeah, I think it's worked so far, but I would like for it to be more on the table. I would say right now it just doesn't feel that way because they're so interested in preserving the integrity of the secondary market. For me, and I know that these implications on collectors, on buyers can be negative, but for me as a player, I would like to prioritize balance and a healthy meta almost over anything. Like the legendary is definitely an issue, and kind of like a subtext to this is also like the whole Fable conversation. But yeah, I would like them to be open to be banned.
Yeah, and Scott is asking, do you think legendary should be depowered? In future should
depowered?
Like yeah, but
or just less powerful when printed.
Less powerful when they're printed. Is what do you think about that?
Less powerful when printed. So if a legendary isn't powerful, like what does that slot really mean? It's just more unique.
Silver palms. They what?
Silver palms. Yeah. True. Some do miss. You're right. Should they be depowered? I don't know. I feel like a lot of them are actually pretty reasonable power level. It's just a few bad actors. Like it's all the exceptions, not the examples, right? It's just like the Crown of Seeds, the Storm Shadows. Shut up. All these. There's a couple of them that are just so strong, and the others are they're quite reasonable. So should they be depowered? I don't know. I think the power level is currently okay. I just think we have a few that sort of exceed our base power level for legendary, and that's what's led to problems.
The irony of you answering this question after your multiple spiels about Stormstriders being banned in Blitz, because let's not forget, we have had a legendary ban before, albeit temporarily, with Stormstriders and Blitz for 2 minutes, was it? I can't remember. But look, so I agree to an extent. I don't think they should be afraid to make legendaries powerful. They're legendaries. I think they need to be powerful. They need to be cards that are enticing. They need to be marquee cards for these classes, these heroes. They need to be cards that you want to play. And I think that's good for the game. But they also, there's a balancing act there. What's the answer to when they get it wrong or when it's not quite right with the rest of the meta? Is it to ban out a lot of things around it to try and balance that and make that legendary work and still have people be able to be attached to it and be able to play those? I think it might be, to be honest. I think that might actually be the answer, is what Alice has gone with so far. But I think if there's an overwhelming sort of thing where it changes too much the dynamic because there's cards they need to target that are too heavily tied to other heroes. I'll give an example. Let's use Hypothermia as an example, right? Had Icelander not been as powerful and they felt like they needed to ban Hypothermia from Ultim and Winter's Wail to balance the hero, and it negatively impacted Icelander, and of course this isn't the scenario that unfolded, but had Icelander not been as powerful and not as prevalent, then that would have felt a bit bad, right? That would have not felt good. In that instance, it would have been like, okay, maybe you just bite the bullet and take the Owl on the Crown of Seeds, ban it until Ultim is Living Legend, or suspend it until Ultim's Living Legend and move on from there. So I think it's a balancing act, but I think I would, at the moment now, I feel like I'd be a little bit surprised to see legendaries get suspended or banned, but I think it would be perfectly fine. There's now so many of them in the game. At some point, it's going to happen, but I wouldn't want to see them depowered necessarily because I think they're an important part of the game.
We've got a lot of questions, so I'm not going to tangent too hard. But one of my least favorite things about Flesh and Blood balance and banning, and all these, whether it's bannings, errata, suspensions, is that they are not willing to delineate between heroes at this point. Maybe it would be too complicated when maybe it wouldn't, but it does feel really bad when something does get, something is banned because there's a particularly bad actor. So like I think back to Blitz and Icelander Stormshadowers, and like that was, I think it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough on Kano, and it was like, Kano was strong, so you could make the argument that it should have been. But what happened was that Icelander was still like the best freaking deck, and then Kano just like sucked. And it was like, come on. So yeah, it's just, I want to bring that up. I think that I want them to be able to sort of, ban things just for certain heroes in the future.
Yeah, I agree. The last thing I'll say is that I think that is what suspension is for. I would say that is what suspending cards is for until a hero is Living Legend, so that it doesn't fully impact the other heroes long term. All right, next question. Kai Yang on Twitter says, "What is Flesh and Blood to you? If it has changed your personal life, career trajectory, or anything of the like." I think this is a great question to ask you, Brendan, right now, and your point in your life. What is Flesh and Blood to you?
Source of irritation. No, I'm kidding. I've thought about this question because it's obviously directly related to Arsenal Pass. I think that a lot of what Flesh and Blood has become is like an identity and a purpose. And like that's why it's just had such an impact on my life, is because I don't know, it was never something that I really planned to do in terms of content, in terms of podcasting, in terms of having friends, etc. So to have it grow into what it has and seeing the game grow from where it was back in 2019, it's just been such an incredible experience. And I think that, at this point it is just, it's an identity and a purpose.
Yeah, Kai, I feel very similar to Brendan. It's a big part of my life as a hobby, as the friends I've made, and as part of what I do on a daily basis. Hasn't really impacted my career necessarily. If I guess maybe I've spent a little bit less time focusing on that as I focus on Flesh and Blood and things and whatnot. But no, it's a very important part of my life, and not just for the game itself, but for the community and for the friends we've made along the way with Arsenal Pass. Because there's some awesome people out there who I wouldn't know if it wasn't for this game. All right, Jimmy Nguyen at KTCG on Twitter asks, how much time do you spend playing a deck you are planning to in general, and how much time is spent on tuning specific matchups? Alternatively, how much time do you spend on a deck you're not sure about before you either give up on it or commit to it? I can take this one first, I think, Brendan, because this is something that me and the doctor, Mr. Damakai, have been discussing recently. We've got very limited time to do any sort of testing for the Auckland calling, which is coming at the end of the month, because both of us are very busy and I'm sort of away for a week and a bit. So the first part of your question is, how much time do you spend playing a deck you're planning to in general? Well, if I'm planning to play a deck, I want to maximize my time on that. I want to find the best list, and I want to find the best like sideboard plans, and make sure I've got the the right list for the right meta that I'm expecting. So for the lead up to Worlds, for instance, it was like locked into Kano pretty early for Worlds, and that was the sole goal. It was like the meta wasn't shifting too much. It was pretty known quantity. It was like, okay, here's the hero I want to play based on what we know, and let's tune and get it right. On the flip side of that, we're coming into a big change in the meta right now with the ban and suspended announcement last week. So on the flip side of that, it's like, okay, how much time do you spend with the deck you're not sure about? Well, there's a lot of things that post this ban, I'm like, okay, could this work? Could this work? Is this worth exploring? And I would say very little time, because you want to eliminate these as quick as possible. So let's take, I don't know, okay, is Livia viable because of the bans now? What's the way to work that out? Well, what's the most potent deck, or the two most potent decks we care about for this new meta? Let's say it's this defensive Ultim deck and it's Briar. Okay, well, let's run that matchup 2 or 3 times, and how does it feel with kind of the way we want to play that deck? And if it's not right, it doesn't feel right, then I'm ready to scrap that deck immediately, or scrap that idea at least, and move on. Because I think in this game, you could go down rabbit holes on certain things for so long, but I think theory can help you solve a lot of those questions that you have, and you can get through some preliminary testing really quickly and help you focus on what you asked about at the start, Jimmy, focusing on deck that you're actually going to play and spend. If I was to attribute my percentage of time, I want to spend like 70-80% of my time on what I'm actually going to play, as opposed to like 20% on exploring things.
Yeah. So I echo everything Hayden said. I will just leave a little anecdote, which is Hayden in particular was pretty surprised when he sort of joined Sasha and I midway through the deck building process in lead up to PT2, and how quickly you're ready to just throw away like months of work and just try to rebuild the wheel. Like it is, with at least that sort of little, I don't know, hive mind between Sasha and I is like, we'll be sitting on decks for like months and months and months. And try to develop a few things, and then as we get down to the wire, it's like that's when a lot of the testing comes in, and we start like seeing holes, seeing issues. Obviously, we like to see this in the process, but they just tend to creep up right at the end. And then it doesn't really take a lot for just to scrap something and just be like, nope, doesn't work at all. I just remember in France, Hayden's like, what? Oh my god.
Yeah, I think that was like some dissonance there between the styles of how we like to do things.
It was very extreme. It was
extreme.
Yeah, it was extreme. But like, that's situation we're in. Like, we brought a deck and it sucked, and we're like, oh god.
Yeah, it was on the flip side for me. It's like I want to explore all that kind of those sort of things as early on as possible, and then I want to just refine and just get it right, because I want to have the best plans. And I think that for instance, we were hurt a little bit by how late that change was at Lille. Like, we didn't understand the deck list, even though it was a very good deck list. We didn't understand the matchup plans quite to the level that maybe we needed to have the success. So that was kind of a big learning for me coming out of that. Was like, okay, into Worlds, I want to lock in I want to do all my exploring early on. I want to, I want to explore threads and tangents for sure, but I want to do it early and not late. And you know what? If information comes to light late, like, I'm not opposed to switching decks, but it's not the sort of thing where I just kind of spray wide and pick late. It's like I'm going the other way these days.
Yeah.
Next up, Jesse Harper at the Orknot on Twitter says, have you ever had to retrain on your fundamentals after realizing the way you thought about value or a specific play pattern was wrong? If so, what did you do to help make that adjustment?
I have. I definitely have, especially in regards to like Icelander. I remember the first time I picked up the Icelander deck, I was just playing it fundamentally wrong. It was like the spell deck, and I was just like focusing way too much on trying to play on my opponent's turn, give them frostbites, and doing all that silly stuff, and didn't really understand what the deck was actually trying to do. And I remember after I had taken a break recently and come back in preparation for ProQuest, I picked up Icelander again. I was just like playing so badly, but I just went back to the foundation of the deck, which is, block with 2 cards, 2 for 8, keep a card in arsenal, maybe have it be a tech card, and just kind of do that loop over and over again. And then game context stuff comes after that. And yeah, I just had to reevaluate, like, okay, why is this deck actually good? It's like, because it plays these attack actions and then has this like, this spell sort of angle as well. So yeah, I definitely have.
Yeah, I feel like that every time I pick up Kano after not playing for a while. It's like,
yeah,
I feel like, and because of the context of Kano changes between formats, like what people are playing, how much Arcane Barrier, how much 8 cards versus not, the game feels drastically different. But I felt that way about other heroes. Picking them up, it's like I played a lot of Guardian early on in Flesh and Blood, and then I didn't play Guardian for a very long time. And picking up Ultim sort of like late last year around the World Championship time to play more of that hero, I just felt like, the fundamentals were a bit foreign to me and had to understand more about getting to late game cycles and like one play pattern concept that I think I had to retrain myself on is life thresholds and where those matter. It was something that we did a lot during the chain meta because of like Husk, and that forced you to do that sort of thing because of carrying Husk, but hadn't done that as much in recent times because I played a lot of aggro decks and combo decks and just hadn't had quite the same experience. So yeah, it definitely happens, and I think you just got to understand and reflect and realize what it is that you probably need to retrain on or need to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Harris at Harris Luke W on Twitter asks, what historical figure would be the best Kano player? Stephen Hawking? ? Einstein. I'd love to see them battle it out in a Kano mirror. Brendan, since you are the connoisseur of Kano.
No, you go first. That's a tough one.
What historical player would... So it has to be, I think, someone who's just like ready to go all in, fiery, aggressive. If I think about historical figure, maybe we'll go with someone like... What about... I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to think like a sports player. Why don't we go someone like a Tiger Woods? I see Tiger Woods on Kano. He's pretty calculated. He's top of his game.
Gets a little wild sometimes, media scandals. That does sound like Kano.
Perfect. Nailed
it. That's crazy. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking Tiger Woods too. Maybe for different reasons. But, just an absolute professional on the pitch. But, as soon as he gets off, you just freak. Crazy.
John Daly. There you go. If we're going golf references.
Oh, God, yeah.
All right. Mason at KMason64 asks, I have a two-part question. These are all Twitter questions, by the way, and then we're getting into Discord questions. I have a two-part question. Do you ever have any thoughts on the return of Azalea, Benji, and Katsu in Outsiders and what that could mean for future sets? Follow-up, do you think revisiting Katsu, the one CC hero, should revitalize and modernize him? And if not, does it matter? Now, this is an interesting question because on last week's pod, we do discuss Outsiders and kind of our thoughts on this, and we do talk about Katsu and like kind of revisiting Katsu and what that could look like. And so maybe I'll start with that part first, and Brendan, you can give your thoughts. But I think it will. Like, I think there's a lot of cards around the combo mechanic that are really interesting, and Katsu, I think, doesn't need all that much to be relevant. Like, we've seen Katsu be really... Katsu, of the heroes in Outsiders that are returning, like, Katsu has been the most relevant in history. Like, Katsu was really relevant early on in Flesh and Blood. It was relevant during the Road to National, the first ever Road to National season. These Katsu control decks, these Katsu sort of hybrid decks, like, Kadachis are powerful, and the thing that shut Kadachis down was Grounded Seeds and Ram's Head. I think without those, like, we'd still see Katsu being played in some way, shape, or form because of just how good Kadachis are and the combo element, the hero ability, the tutor ability. We talk about the tutor ability on that pod, actually. In terms of thoughts on Azalea, Benji, returning Outsiders, I mean, I really dislike Benji as a hero. I don't like that design. I don't like the evasion mechanic of Benji, so I'm a little bit hesitant about that mechanic in Limited, actually, primarily. I don't think we're going to see too much impact and Blitz, and to be honest, I haven't really thought about it too much. Azalea, again, we talked about it last week on the pod, and there's a lot of cards for Azalea that are really interesting to me, and I just wonder for Azalea, what will it take? What will it take to make Azalea be a good hero in Flesh and Blood? Or will Azalea always be a medical? Maybe it gets better again, more tools against aggro, but it's still just a medical. That's the interesting thing to me.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it brief, but I would say that I'm looking to revisit Katsu or just revisit Katsu. Honestly, maybe Ninja Control, and try to exploit Flick Flack in lieu of the Guardian bans, and kind of nerfs. If Ninja gets an expanded card pool and can maybe shore up its Guardian matchup, if we head into a very aggressive format, maybe Flick Flack could come back in as a way to sort of beat down those decks and get a bunch of value. So honestly, that's what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm. Phil at Phil Bickle says, do you prefer sets like Everfest and Dynasty for releasing cards to top up the least successful heroes, or putting strong cards in pre-con decks like Dorinthia vs Rhinar with Glistening Steelblade and Run Through? Both is fine, but you're forced to choose in this question. Don't worry, Phil. I have a quick answer for you, and it's
both is not fine.
Well, I'll tell you which one's definitely not fine. It's not the pre-con. I don't want. I don't want pre-con.
Trash, dude.
Yeah, I hate that. I really like the idea of having pre-cons, and I'm okay with having cards that people want to get, but not in that kind of way, shape, or form where it's so important to how they're so like glistening. I mean, run through for Sai, for instance, like.
Yeah, and so I'll say something in my what I'm saying doesn't reflect Hayden's opinion, but I would say that sort of pre-con thing, it just felt like such a cash grab. It was so gross. Like, not only was the product kind of lame, way too overpriced as an entry product, but like putting staples in is just so unnecessary. I think I'm on Hayden's side, of course. Like, definitely not that, but I would go as far as I would just like, I never want to see that again, where there's like staples in this product that's designed to be like a big inner product that's for tabletop, etc.
Yeah, I want introductory product. I want products for people to be able to like show to their friends and pick up the game. I think the classic battles kind of missed the mark a little bit on a few things, price, cards, etc. So yeah. James Kendi Zolka, great guy, James. Shout out. Do you think cards and minigames should be shaped for more engageable and rewarding growth for new players?
What does that mean? Does that mean
a very big question? Well, I think James is asking, do you think that the design of Flesh and Blood moving forward and the way that metagames are shaped through, I guess, design, but also maybe banner suspended, all the decisions that LSS make need to be more focused for newer players than they are currently? And this comes back to, the discussion around variants, I'm sure, and all these sorts of things. I have a thought on this because I've been thinking about it a lot for newer players. And I think to a degree, but also let's think about the kind of principles and the strengths that Flesh and Blood has been built and designed on, and it's this competitive gameplay that has lower variance that is rewarding to master and get better at. So yes, I think some experiences should be good for new players, and we talked at length about this a couple of pods ago about Star of the Show, right? Actually, I think we might have talked on our Patreon pod, maybe. I can't remember we talked about it, but we talked about Star of the Show as this kind of idea of, looking back on it, was it good for the game? And my kind of guess concluding thought was yes, to a degree. I think it was good for the game. It was accessible for new players, etc. But also there was some real feels bads about it. So how do you execute that without completely alienating other sides to the player base? So I do think there's a responsibility to make it more engageable and rewarding for new players, but also at the same time, I don't think you can alienate the current player base.
Yeah, so I think that if you add in too much variance to try to increase like the new player experience and make it more approachable, like you risk it's a very, very fine balance, and you risk losing the essence of Flesh and Blood and what makes the game so good, and probably the core reason why a lot of us enjoy it. I, on the other hand, think that Starvo was actually really bad for the game. I don't think that variance is inherently bad. I think that variance exists in the game. People don't give enough credit. Like, I think that Briar and Phi are relatively high variance classes. I think that Starvo was just like a built-in feels bad when the game outside of the game, win it in deck building kind of deck. Also, like, what people don't remember about Starvo is that deck just made most other decks it played against not function. And it was terrible to play against, and people playing it didn't really particularly enjoy it on the aggregate, from at least people came up to me at these tournaments, like Indianapolis, I remember specifically, people that were like 6-0, 7-0, etc., and they were like, yeah man, I hate this game right now. And it was because they're just playing Starvo and they really didn't enjoy it. And yeah, so I wouldn't like something like Starvo, but I just think that for Flesh and Blood to be more approachable to new players, it's not a variance question. I think that it's more a question of creating products that are better for introductory players, better for kitchen table, etc. Like if we had just like proper dual decks, proper sort of introductory products, I think that it would go a long way for the game, and maybe an expansion on things like PvE and UPF would also do a lot for the casual play base.
Yep, I think we can end it there. The last thing I'll say is, I think if you think about some of the things when you show people this game, what are the things that they hook onto immediately? It's like, wow, that game felt so close. Wow, there's so many decisions to be made during a turn. Wow, I get to interact on like a turn-to-turn basis from turn one. Those are the things people like about the game. As new players, you've got to keep those, I think, fundamental, because they're also things that players who currently play the game like about. Jake Warburton asks, what do you guys hope Azuri and Riptide text boxes say? I don't even know where to begin, to be honest with this. I just hope that whatever Riptide does with traps is interesting, it's good as well, and it is not uninteractive. That's all I hope for.
Yeah, I hope that it's like actually good and not just cute. Like, I don't know. There's been some examples of that, like I guess maybe Arachne is a little bit of an example of an idea, and the execution just kind of ended up just being like, it's not quite there. But Outsiders could expand on Arachne specifically. Yeah, I just hope the trap thing is not a gimmick. I hope it's it's actually like a cool way to engage, a cool new way to approach traps and engage with the game, etc. I know it's broad, but like, God, who knows with this this new hero?
I also just don't want it to be like because of how traps could be. They could be super uninteractive, right? Like I want to make sure that you can still interact with them. I like the ability to pay for the current traps we've already seen. For instance, Azuri. I don't know. I just hope that it has some sort of flavor of a ninja turned assassin. That's what I would like to see. Whether that means that we get some sort of similar feels to ninja from an attack perspective, but assassin style from an on hit or disruption. Ronnie at Lord Yurka asks, what card do you think will rise from the ashes and get the wounded bull treatment with the recent bans and suspensions? I guess what Ronnie's asking is basically, what cards from previous history in this potential current format might we see that we haven't seen before?
It's really easy. It's Titan's Fist.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. I mean, I was hoping it'd be Annals of Sutcliffe, but it's not. I mean, yeah, is there other cards? I mean, I don't know. Like
Wounded Bull treatment is Titan's Fist, right? Like it's just like it's a limited card, and like Oldhim is probably still going to be good after the bans. Like I feel pretty confident it's still going to be good after the bans, and like it's still going to be swinging like a one-hander occasionally when it needs to use a shield. So it's Titan's Fist.
Maybe Sift.
Maybe
no more. RFL asks, do we know we know you both like gameplay feel of heroes like Kano and Reinhardt, but what Fab hero is your favorites aesthetically? Your favorite aesthetic hero?
That's a tough one, actually. I think that it is Viserai. I just think that the whole Runeblade thing is super cool. I honestly loved Viserai as soon as it was released. It was just like initially the gameplay was not super fun on him, but it became fun, and then they banned the fun part out of it. But yeah, Viserai I think is the coolest theme. I really like the Wizard theme, to be honest. Like I really like the Icelander theme, and Kano. But yeah, what about you, Hayden?
I really
take
like
your answer with Viserai.
No,
metrics. Okay,
I really like yeah. So the two kind of areas I'm really most interested in are metrics and the Demonastery. So it would be Viserai and Dash. I think the Dash at this point, I feel like just outstated welcome a little bit. I want something. I want a new mechanologist from Metrics. So, but it would have been Dash previously. I think the steampunk aesthetic is really cool. So, yeah, great question. Dihimono TCG asks, in a game like Fab, where you draw up your hands at the end of your turn, the concept of control decks is very different from other TCGs, as you can't deny their hand resources. And thus, it's hard to not connect control with fatigue in Fab. What do you think a good control deck conceptually should do and achieve? That's a huge question.
Yeah. So outside of fatigue, I think, and outside it, I think it's board permanence, and not every control deck can do that. Like I think like decks like Dash that build up items and build up, or even like Oldhim, Kano, things like Kano's not a control deck, but building up energy potions, building up your frost hexes, like building up permanence on the board is a sort of aspect of a control deck in Flesh and Blood. Outside of that, like a lot of the things that we would consider control decks are kind of just disruptive, so they're not actually control. So outside of fatigue, I guess the most accurate answer is probably just like permanence.
Yeah, I think defensive disruption is something that screams control to me in this game. Whether it's it's channeling frigid, it's ice reacting, it's
Nightingale.
Yeah, defense reactions. And then the other thing would be incremental advantage. So Dash with items is a good example of that, right? Like you're controlling your life total as the resource, not your opponent's hand, for instance, like you sort of allude to. But you're controlling your life total as your resource to build up a board state to control the game, in the mid part before ending with this kind of ability to just chip away value. And that's kind of what control means to me in Flesh and Blood. It's about controlling not necessarily just what your opponent's doing, but actually controlling the game state and manipulating life totals to be in a position to get to particular in-game states that you're aiming for. And that's what I think control is. Simon at Very News Much asks, what do you think about no further PQ season announced for this year? Seems like there is not much to look forward to. Well, Simon, there is a Pro Quest season for the end of the year that we know is happening after World Championships. It's on LSS's timeline that they released when they did the OP announcement. Was it earlier this year or before Christmas, whenever it was? So we do know that there will be one for PT1 2024. But yeah, I mean, me and Brendan were talking about this the other day. It's like Road to Nationals is coming up at some point in the middle of the year. But between, if you're not qualified for the Pro Tour, if you're playing at a grassroots level, what you're looking for to skirmish, sure. But yeah, I do think there's a little bit of, I think we need more potential battle hardens and callings to be able to invigorate and excite people for events in their local areas. If you're in North America, for instance, it'd be great if in the next 6 months we have, minimum sort of 4 callings that people can go and attend, one on each point of the star and, north, south, east, west, etc. So people can get to them pretty easily as well.
You ever seen that James Franco meme where he has the noose on his neck and he's like, first time? I think that was like good for this situation. But yeah, I really hope they bring back the calling circuit, to be honest. Like they came out of the gate so hot after Vegas and then that sort of limited calling circuit in Tales of Aria. It just feels like it's cooled off so much. And it feels like there's not a lot of reason. There's not a lot of motivation and like reason and things to aspire to outside of the Pro Tour and Worlds, it feels like right now.
Yeah, I really like
too, I guess.
Yeah. So we had Nationals, obviously, but it's like the towards the end of the year still looks like it's going to be reasonably busy again. It's this kind of next sort of period of time, especially with Outsiders. Well, let's be, Outsiders is not far away now, but it is a skirmish season, and then the Pro Tour, there's not as much as maybe people would like. So yeah, I do wish there's something else. It doesn't even, what I would also love is like some incentive for big community areas or big sort of community players to put on events, we've seen in America with like
Realm Games and
isn't it
the grassroots like community stuff is what you're talking about? Because like
that's what I'm talking about. I would love to see more of that.
In the US is that in the US is that
pretty good.
Well, honestly, the United States is actually spoiled in terms of like grassroots community flesh and blood tournaments. I think that they're actually better than they're doing better than like Legend Story stuff right now, to be honest. Like Min-Max Games and Realm Games, like
it's one on the West Coast as well. But
yeah, they're going so far out of their way and crushing it.
They're just good supplements, right? And I know there's some people talking about it here in Australia, but I think those are also great things. And I do think as players, we can encourage, our community sort of leaders and event organization stores into potentially doing this. Or you can, I know there was like Noah, who's a level 2 judge here, like did it a year or two ago with like a local store here to like put this on. So there is things that can be done. But yeah, kind of off topic of the question. Moving on, we've got a question from Azulia Ton. Thoughts on future classes that focus on healing, i.e. cleric, druid, etc. Any thoughts on life gain and healing? There's a lot of it in this game.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna actually come out with a class that's based around life gain, like as a primary thing it's doing. I think it's unlikely.
I think the one of the troubles with it is that it kind of moves away from the fundamentals of the game, which is this idea that your life total is a really precious resource, and if you're able to manipulate that further away than trade. So at the moment, right, we have cards like Sigil Solace, Healing Balm, etc. These cards represent trading, gaining life, but they also do it at the cost of a card, and they're generally under rate, right? They're a 3 for 0, for instance, and your extra point in a lot of cases, apart from Sigil, which has no defense. So, you're already kind of trading down on those. So there's a cost to gaining life. If a hero came out that revolved around gaining life, I think that's really hard to balance in the context of your deck being a resource. Like, would that just mean that the deck is just like the only way that deck ever wins is like fatigue, for instance? And that wouldn't particularly be good for the game, I think. And, patrons would have heard our Patreon pod last week. We talked about fatigue as a strategy and a concept and how to beat it. But strategies that are just pure fatigue, I think are not something that LSS want to necessarily put on the board, pure and simple. So, yeah, I think if they're going to do it, it needs to have some sort of trade-off where that life would be taken away from you some way, shape, or form, or had to be used for a certain amount of resources or something. So it'd be a really hard one to balance, I think.
Yeah, pure life gain would be a really like lazy and uninteractive game design, and I don't think I think that like we have some life game cards and they serve their function, but yeah, if there was a class that was like actually like most of its class cards were just trying to heal, I think that it would do something maybe on top of that, right?
Yes,
where by healing you're also interacting with the game state. But even then, I think they'll kind of stay away from healing.
Kev Dane kind of star.
Yeah.
Right, Bruno Babin. Why are LSS afraid to give Wizard a legendary wizard hat? I think we got this question twice actually, which is pretty funny.
Give them a legendary wizard hat. Well, honestly, Ragamuffin's hat could be a fable, and it would be appropriate, to be honest. That card is freaking ridiculous. Brian Gobley, if you listen to this, please don't ban it. But yeah, we don't need one. The current wizard hats are freaking great. By the way, Sasha Markovic came up with a perspective wizard hat. I think it had to do something with like a bunny out of a hat and like generate an ally and stuff. He did it like PT2, and it was really unique, and I liked it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like power level, wizard's good on the hat slot.
Problem is, hat is about manipulating your deck or your hand. It's about manipulation, right? And wizard doesn't need more of that. I think that is something that could be super, super powerful to wizard. So I think that's why, to be honest, it's about manipulation.
We'll take it though if they want to give it. We'll take it.
I might not. Question here from Lehit. How would you advise intermediate players to find out deeper knowledge and nuances about a hero they want to start playing? Videos, channels on the Discord, ? Also, can you think of heroes for which typical heuristics differ a lot? I think most heroes, differences in classes, heuristics differ a lot outside of like the core sort of competencies of defending and attacking. Like value can range because of, like a lot of heroes, they focus more on the resources of the deck and the power of those cards. Whereas some other heroes have a lot of redundancy and they don't have to do so. A lot of heroes focus, have like in-game sort of things. So I do think that like heuristics, as Brendan loves to say, can differ a lot between almost any class outside of sort of pure defensive, offensive math, and even that can differ.
Yeah, I think for resources, it's deck text and deck guides for me. Just want to hear from the sort of the mouth of the master, like get the primary source. It's like super, super helpful. But yeah, in terms of
playing it,
heroes
playing it is one of the best ways, honestly. Like just getting in the reps and playing against people who also have experience, I think, are good ways to do it. And if short of that, you don't have that in your sort of local community. I do think, you're right. It's just going and seeking resources from those that do. Trying to go back and watch the world's coverage of Michael Hamilton playing Icelander and try and pick up on the things that he's looking at, all the decisions that are being made turn to turn, and you will learn a lot about those heroes.
Yeah.
Derek Peters. Most decks rely on min-maxing to achieve victory. Any generic card can set them over the edge, i.e. stubby hammers. With this in mind, are generic cards going to eventually be eliminated? Interesting question. I get what Derek's saying, right? Brennan, you made a comment to me the other day off mic about sometimes the game can feel a little bit like min-maxing to a degree. And while that's true, I think the ability for us to have disruptive elements, for us to have abilities, ways to push over the top of damage thresholds. So, think about combos and ways to make your cards worth more with synergy. Are always going to put that on the back foot in some way, shape, or form. So I don't think that's always true. Like most decks rely on, you've always got to push damage, right? You've got to find the most damage to win games. That is true, but it might not necessarily be on a turn-to-turn thing. It could be across multiple turn cycles. It could be hedging cards, sandbagging cards for certain other cards to come up. Mordred Tide's a great example. How do I get the most out of Mordred Tide? Sometimes I have to hold on to that card to do so, or pitch it for second cycle, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the generics aren't going anywhere. Hey, now I was wondering, by the way, can I ask you a question? Can I have a question on this part?
Go for it.
Yeah. So do you think that the heroes in Flesh and Blood, like a hero, like we don't have colors, right? We have heroes and we have classes. Do you think that's limiting to game designs if you look at sort of Flesh and Blood in perpetuity?
No, I don't think so, because I think you can always bring in new classes and talents that enable you to shape the way that, like if you compare it to colors or to factions in other games, right? The thing that a lot of those other games don't have and can't do is you can, in Flesh and Blood, they can put a talent onto it to put a spin on that. Now that brings its own sort of issues with balancing and sort of ongoing gameplay and what they might have to do to be able to understand that. But I do think that there's always going to be avenues to go down with game design because of that. Because you can balance the use of class-specific cards, you can balance the use of talented cards, and you can balance the use of generic cards, I think, to do that. And that's why I think generic cards will never go anywhere. I think we'll see less of them because we have, Welcome to Wraith and Arcane Rising proportionately gave us a lot of strong generics, which made sense because we needed them to support classes that didn't have deeper support from a class level. We only had one set for each of these classes. Now we have all these supplemental sets, we have classes being revisited, and these heroes have more access to class cards, so we need less generics than we did previously. But think about Arachne, right? Arachne shows up on the scene. It's like, oh wow, we need to fill this with more generics than we would for other heroes because the class pool just isn't as deep. But we have access to these powerful generics from the earlier sets, and that was a fundamental base that I think purposefully LSS decided to do. get Sink Below in there, get Unmovable in there, get Snatch, get Scar for a Scar, get Inline Strike, get these cards in there early so that these heroes can continue to have access to these while building out the base of the card pool.
Mm-hmm.
Great question from Brendan Patrick there, and from Derek. Aggro Blaze 96. The difference in a good use of Stalagmite versus a great use of Stalagmite. This is a topic I would love to hear you discuss. I mean, I think this is probably left for your Guardian experts, but I can give you a quick example of this. People will often use Stalagmite to prevent, 3. So say it's a 2 damage from the actual attack coming in. That's a bad use of Stalagmite, right? If that Frostbite is not relevant, that is a bad use of Stalagmite. Now, if that Frostbite is relevant to maybe stop your opponent playing the last card in their hand and arseling it, that's a maybe a medium use, bad to medium use. Let's say you think they have a 0-4 left in their hand and they have no resources left, and you block so that they get a Frostbite and they can't use the last card in hand. Medium use, but they're going to get that card next turn. On the other hand, a great use of Stalagmite would be your opponent has 1 resource left. You know that they're going to play their 0-4 with Go Again into their Rosetta Thorn, and you have no more defensive capability left after this. All of a sudden, that Frostbite and that Stalagmite block defends for 2, stopping the 4 coming in, and stopping the 4 coming in from a Rosetta Thorn. Could be up to 10 damage. And even if they do play that card, they've now lost the card from Arsenal for next turn. So that's what I would call a great use or a good use of Stalagmite.
Yeah, I mean the best use case for me were back when you would play Starvo against Prism. Stalagmite would often block 6 to 8. You just wait until if they have heavy Go Again and you can kind of predict the resources in hand. It's like if they can't get past that Frostbite, they're going to be looking to put a sort of long combat chain on you. It's just that's when you should be using Stalagmite. I think Stalagmite's also pretty important in blocking or disrupting key turns as well. So not all turns are really creative equal. Sometimes there's sometimes there's tons of there's 8 prismatic shields on the board. Sometimes there's 2. Sometimes you have a Channel Mount Heroic on the board. Sometimes you don't, right? And a lot of times you're saving your Stalagmite for those critical points. It's just but at the end of the day, yeah, Spectral Shield. At the end of the day, you are just kind of doing the math, right? And I think you want to be getting vastly more than 2 out of your block.
Yeah, you big turn big 5 turns, for instance. That Frostbite can prevent them from pushing. It's it might stop them from getting the attack they need off Lava Burst, for instance. That to get that off. It can be really impactful if used in the right way. JB asks, CNC and E-Strikes are used in many top performing decks, expensive, keep newer players from joining the game, and also hurts the performance of certain heroes, Azalea versus CNC. Do you think the game would be healthier if both of these cards were banned/limited?
No, I think they just reprint them to stop stem the first issue you talked about, which is them being expensive and I guess being prohibitive to new players. It hurting Azalea, it kind of sounds like you've been on the other side of that board from that question. I mean, Command & Conquer has a lot of other use cases than just bowling Azalea. It is a very important card in terms of stopping decks that just hoard their arsenal and try to do a 5-card hand without interacting with the opponent at all. Stop cards that are playing a million defense reactions. Command & Conquer has a very good use case in Flesh and Blood. And if you think it's bad now, if back in Arcane Rising and Crucible of War, it was in literally every single deck. The aggro decks played it, everybody played it, because the format before that, Welcome to Wraith, everyone played defense reactions. So the Command & Conquer you see nowadays is actually pretty reasonable. In Lightning Strike, yeah, I don't think it goes in every single deck, to be honest. It's just it's just a really, really good card. And I think it's a fine card, to be honest. Yeah, I've also personally, I have no problem with them reprinting it into Oblivion. And yeah, so the price thing that can be solved.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I did my piece about generics before. I think powerful generics are really important to this game. I think LSS printed them for a reason. I can't see them being banned. I wouldn't want them to be banned. To your point about the first part, yeah, just reprint them. I mean, if the concern is about those cards holding value, I mean, that's first edition, then there's no promise that cards aren't going to be reprinted. And I think these are the exact sort of cards that should be reprinted. So, especially with Welcome to Wraith and Arcane Rising Unlimited going out of print, I think we need to see these cards reprinted. Last question from our Twitter comes from Duofennel asking scaling of rewards and events. Both EU Battle Hardened was 170 plus and 256 players and only provided basic 2,000 prize pool. Of course, they sold out because people are hungry to play, as despite the size of the player pool, we haven't had a calling since Leo. So not really a question here, but I think Duofennel is asking us to talk about the scaling of rewards and events. Yeah, I think this is why LSS have come up with the scaled calling, the different tiers to calling to kind of prevent this from happening. I think what it shows LSS is we need more events in Europe. Europeans are hungry to play this game. People are traveling from all over Europe to play these battle hardens. I know, with the Germans flying to both the battle hardens have happened. In fairness, though, we do have a few battle hardens come out. We've got Bologna, I think. So we've got an Italian battle harden coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. They are happening. But I do think, it is. We do need calling announcement for Europe. But I think the battle hardens themselves, look, the way to do this is run more of them. And I think keep the prize pools the same. And because you can return on the investment from the players showing up. And if you're getting all these players, well, people want to play, but I just don't think that you can. There's a limit to how much you can do, right? Like, where you can have an event every weekend. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
You can increase prize pools, I guess, based on players, but I think that's what the scaling callings is going to do.
I love the concept of scaling prize pools. To be honest, I think it's super, super fair.
And invites as well, right? It's like, okay, Battle Harden is over 200
100%.
players. It's like maybe top 4 get invites, for instance. Like, I guess they have to balance it off with how many invites they're wanting to give out, and that is the tough piece, obviously. But I think that's something that LSS should look at. Right, Discord questions, Brendan. Question from Flake. I love you. Question: do you love me? Of course, we love you, Flake. He knows that. Well, Brendan maybe not. Fortunas on Discord asks: is Brainstorm one tome away from being playable?
Hayden?
Probably. Yeah. How about I'll say yes. I don't know, but I'll say yes.
Is it better? I mean, it depends what playable means. Like, it's playable now. I mean, for it to compete with Aether Wildfire combo, I think it's maybe. But the Brainstorm thing just seems a little too cute right now, right? With the other things that Wizard's doing. And I think that's like the main thing that's, the main thing going against it. Also, I don't think they want it to be good, to be fair. I think that it's intentionally at the power level it's at.
I don't think it'd be a very fun gameplay experience, to be honest. It reminds me of...
I mean, I do, but...
reminds me of Second Sunrise and Eggs and Magic, which if you ever played in that kind of format, I did not enjoy. Anyway, Dragon Pizza Punch. What type of Azalea would you be playing right now in preparation for Outsiders? Go tall, aim counters, ? I mean, we explored... Well, I say we. During the testing process, people were done testing, and by people I mean Sasha and Mike Cronkia, and just continue to play Azalea at end, and we're just playing Go Tall Azalea, and I think it's the best. It's very good into aggro decks, and it was very good into Icelander as well at the time. It's probably what I'd be looking at. I mess around with the aim counter stuff. I just think that the payoff you get doesn't match how friggin' good Death Dealer is.
Agreed.
Cool. Ninja Sprite, sorry. What other proactive sort of disruption other than Ice do you think should be explored? Well, obviously we've seen Arachne, and we're going to see Assassin be explored in this new set. Do you have any other sort of thoughts about proactive disruption, Brendan? I mean, I don't particularly like proactive disruption that much. I think the one that I think I could see being explored is like zone and cost prohibitors. So things that allow opponents to not use cost. So like, what's the arrow that stops 0 costs being pitched or played? That card's interesting to me, right? It's Frostlock, that kind of like prohibitive, 1 turn for this 1 turn, you can't do this, or Red in the Ledger, you take damage if you do this for 1 turn. Those are interesting to me. Things where, you can't play cards of cost. What was the first thing I said? I've forgotten. But those kinds of things outside of Ice, the ones that are 1 turn cycle effects that, you can potentially block to stop them, but they're maybe not as oppressive as what Ice could be. I don't want to see that. Like, I don't like the assassin mill sort of nature of that proactive disruption.
I just want some Trinispheres and Blood Moons. Like, you can't pitch blue cards, you can't play cards that cost all game, just permanents you can't interact with. No, I think that it's tough. I think the taxing system fit pretty well in the Flesh and Blood. Outside of that, I don't think it's in their sort of core tenet of game design to put in anything that's like that kind of hoses or permanently restricts and stuff like that.
Yeah. My problem is I think Ice was too flexible. Frostbites were too flexible. I think that's kind of an issue. Brad Tash asks, how do you navigate bad hands? One of the worst feelings in Flesh and Blood is taking tempo with a great play and enduring into absolute garbage. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how you handle this from both a gameplay and mental perspective.
But you made the deal with the devil and you picked that deck. Like, part of it is your deck choice, right? If you're making a deal with the devil, you're like, oh, I'm going to play this Runeblade deck. I'm going to play, 70 attack actions, 30 non-attack actions, or maybe you flip on that and then you draw the poo-poo hand. But that's the trade for power. That's the variance right there. How do you deal with it? I mean, there's decks that don't. really encountered that scenario as much or nearly as much. So they're much more consistent, have sort of replaceability with their cards. And mentally, yeah, I mean, mentally, I put I put a Hope Merchant's Hood in my sideboard, or I realized that I picked this deck because I knew this was a possibility to happen. I understand it can be frustrating, but I mean that's part. People talk about how low variance Flesh and Blood is, but it's pretty like there's definitely a lot of variance. Like you have to draw the resources you need to play your cards. You need to draw your blues. You need to draw your reds, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have lands, but we still have variance in terms of resources and output.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is the existential crisis I have every time I play Briar, right? Like it's going to happen, and yes, there are ways you can mitigate it. Most of that is in deck building and card selection. So, for instance, like playing defense reactions in your deck that wants to take tempo and hold it. Not a good idea, right? I never understood people playing Sigil of Suffering, for instance, in Briar. Like, I think that card is pure trash because if you take tempo, that is one of the cards that can absolutely kill you. So, there's those sorts of things. In terms of like how to deal with it from just like a hand-to-hand perspective, I mean, you just have to make the most of your hand and make good decisions on the back of it. It's like, okay, maybe I take tempo here. I have a 4-card hand. Can I just defend with the 3 worst cards and set up the best card in Arsenal to try and retake the tempo? Like, that's really all you can do. And from a mental standpoint, yeah, like Brendan says, if you don't want to have those feelings, I think you have to move away from those kinds of decks and play decks that are a lot more consistent. Maybe it's something like, Guardian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Kano has the feels bad in a different way. But anyway, Zombie asks, in the most recent ban restricted, it was discussed how one of the reasons for Belittle's banning was that it homogenized aggro decks towards playing head jabs, turn on its search effects. However, there's a card in the current format that is played in more decks than Belittle, well, there is now because Belittle's banned. Pummel is currently played in 3, sometimes 4 decks: Ultim, Bravo, Rhina, Arachne. I mean, I wouldn't play in Rhina, but what are your thoughts on Pummel as a powerful generic, its deck building cost, and whether or not it creates toxic play patterns? Many players I've spoken to believe that the effect is too powerful for its cost. This question's quite long and goes on and talks about CNC and Guardians, Crush effects, etc., as well as us. We believe a hands-on approach to format management that we've seen over the past couple of years is the best course between LL and BNRs. Many people in the local play groups are beginning to feel fatigued with constant changes rather than the formats themselves. Should the devs just let a format ride when the problems are more about stagnation than active issues? That last part of the question is actually super interesting to me. I think for competitive integrity, to make people want to go and play these competitive events, they do have to freshen events up, especially when Alice is committed to not releasing too many sets at a time. But, people did say maybe they could have let this format ride out for the rest of, there's no Pro Tour, it just goes to these callings and then we're done and we have outsiders. Could we have just let this format ride? Maybe, but we were going to have a lot of convergence on two to 3 decks for this last month of the format, if not. So, and the answer to that is you've played ProQuest. If you don't want to play this format for the last month, you don't have to, right? So I get it at a local level when you're playing Armories week to week, it's a bit different. But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. At the end of the day, ban suspended is for balancing. Living Legend is not for balancing.
Okay, that is definitely true, and yeah, it's very, very fragile. It does look like we're going down the path of just like heavy-handed sort of influence from the publisher in terms of banning, in terms of like artificially freshening things up. Like I did think that the PT, like the pre-Pro Tour ban feels bad. It was like a little bit too short notice. I wasn't a fan of it. But I do understand them, artificially kind of banning things to freshen things up. I don't know if it's the best course of action, but yeah, it's one of those things that we're really going to see how it plays out sort of in the next 2 to 3 years, because I feel like we're really starting to hit that like critical maximum of card pool. Like more and more cards kind of feel like they're getting banned, and I feel like as we expand the card pool, it just gets linearly more challenging to sort of enact that. So I'm interested to see it is particularly interesting too, I think, in Flesh and Blood, how honestly most of our metas have been a 1 premier aggro deck, 1 premier defensive deck, and then like not really a lot in between, except for like these sort of like Prism-esque, just like alternate kind of ways to play the game that are just fundamentally unfair. And yeah, I'm interested to see if we just kind of follow that path for a long time in terms of metas. I don't think we were there last time, but I think we're headed there now.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great question. I hadn't really thought about it again, but me and Brendan, I think we're pretty outspoken on artificially changing a format, right? It sometimes doesn't feel correct to do so, especially when it's towards the back end of a of a format, but at the same time, the set release schedule is fairly not irregular, but there's fewer sets than other games would have. So I do think it's tough, and of course the eternal nature of the game. It's really tough to balance. I think we're going to continue to see pretty heavy-handed ban spending announcements, like you said, Brendan. Let's go back to Pummel quickly, because I think my answer to this question is I think this card I don't get. This card is not on my list of cards that I'm worried about for this game that are powerful, too powerful. Fundamentally, the card at its cost too. So if you want to look at this from, a CNC, right, that's the best return, but the CNC is doing half the work there. What the Pummel return is 2 cards for 7. That's the best you're going to get out of it in theory, right? Because you get your 4 damage, plus you get a card from their hand, or your resources, and you can't play it on a 1 cost, right? You can only play it on a 2 cost. So you don't get that extra resource you get for pitching a blue and playing a Pummel. You can't do anything with that without a Tunic Kano, without another card to pitch, for instance, to actually play the attack. So you're getting two cards for 7. That is the return you're getting at a maximum of Pummel. And then also there's a lot of deck building restraints to that. There is a card that blocks 2. There is a card that when you don't have these attacks does nothing. There is they can defend it. They can have defense reactions. This card is not a card that I understand people's complaints about, other than just getting hit by Pummel kind of sucks.
Yeah, I actually think the Pummel is really fair. I think it's been around, it's obviously been around since Welcome to Wraith, but it's been relevant in the meta for a long time. I think what makes Pummel really good in Flesh and Blood is when you play it on a 2 cost, you play it off a Tunic, so you're doing 2 card, big tack plus Pummel, and if it's a CNC as well, you're dealing with multiple unhit effects that are all devastating. So that's when Pummel actually, outside of that, Pummel feels extremely fair to me, to be honest. It's extremely fair.
It's a bit like, to me, being like, wow, Snatch is so powerful when there's a Channel Mail Heroic on the board. Yeah, it is. But, there's a lot of other work you have to do to make that Snatch be coming in for 7 off 1 card. So, no, I don't have a problem with it. And I think I think these sort of generics, again, goes back to these powerful generics. This isn't one of the most powerful generics, but it's a good, interesting generic for the game, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, talking about Command and Conquer, I think Command and Conquer is really helpful with the game. I've played in a game, I played Flesh and Blood when Command and Conquer wasn't a thing. It gets freaking degenerate. That card serves a really good function. I think that if it wasn't for Command and Conquer, some of these aggro decks would be freaking miserable to play against, because you really want to be able to hit things. It's we talked about it in the earlier question. I guess it feels bad for the Rangers because they really get hosed by it, but the Briar decks and the Phi decks that were just going to sit on their Art of War, or sit on their what used to be Plunder Run, just forever, just waiting for that turn, it was not fun. So I really like Command and Conquer, to be honest, in Flesh and Blood.
Me too. Let's reprint it. Co-pilot. Who are y'all's favorite heroes lore-wise? Well, we already talked about kind of aesthetic, and I think lore-wise, for me, it's actually Viserai and probably Livia. Livia has really interesting lore, but Viserai would be another one I'd go back to, same as the aesthetic question.
Yeah, I don't think I've really read much lore outside of the lore book. The lore book really has some detailed stuff in it, to be honest. Everything else is pretty surface level.
All the articles that come out, but there's been less of that in recent sets, so I hope we get back to it. There was a ton for Monarch, for instance.
Yeah, the Ira lore is actually pretty cool. Ira and the Crimson Haze and the whole gang and stuff. I mean, that's a freaking throwback. Oh my god.
Quickness. What would it take to make Katsu more viable? Feels like his great strength is flexibility, but it isn't the best any particular thing. Well, we kind of talked about this already. We talked about this in last week's pod with Katsu. Katsu is poised to, I think what it needs is a bit more consistency. And, I talked about the Hurricane technique line last week. I really like that kick line. I think it's super powerful. But I think you need something else in there as well, ways to push that, or you need some ways to get a recurring threat, maybe like a Hurricane technique. That card, to me, epitomizes what I think a Katsu deck should be able to do. And at the moment, it only has that, plus some good efficient attacks, plus master momentum. It just feels like it needs just one more thing to really get there on that same sort of page.
Yeah, I think that Katsu has one of those powerful hero abilities in the game. It's actually really close to being just absolutely busted. Honestly, the main issue with Katsu for me is just it's been edged out by other aggro decks. It's been an aggro deck. I mean, obviously, way in the past it was not an aggro deck, but it's an aggro deck that just got edged out on sheer numbers by the Rune Blades and now the other Ninja. It's not far from being absolutely busted because you have a functional tutor ability built on the card. That's just insane.
Yeah, and cards like Flick Flack, right? Like, what's most interesting to me about Katsu is not a pure aggro deck. It's a mid range sort of style, and I think, the Crouching Tiger for me, that ain't it. You know what I mean? Like
Nah.
the printing of that helps for an aggro build to a degree, but I don't think that's where Katsu can shine the most. So I think there's a bit of an issue. Travis Fights Dragons. Travis asks, do you believe the interaction within the ice talent was a bad idea for the game long term, or was it simply a case of it being overtuned? In your opinion on the talent as a whole and its place in the game?
I remember when it first came out, I was super excited. I was like, this is exactly what the game needs. Nobody interacts. Like, we need to be able to attack some of these decks. This was back in the day when Chain was just like YOLO Necropotent off the top of the deck, just wrecking everybody. I was like, yeah, this is exactly what the game needs. Tax is perfect. In its execution, I don't know. It's weird. I don't want to be too biased because of the format we just came out of, but I personally think it's been fine. Like you said, it's a bit too flexible, which I could probably agree with. But I think it's important for the game. I would like there to be a way to play a more controlling deck outside of just like raw fatigue and defense reactions. And Ice feels like the pathway to do that. And it feels a lot better than just slapping down cards to block every turn.
I agree with that, but I do think Travis Arce has been overtuned. I do think it was to a degree. I think Winter's Wail was too much. That's when that weapon came to prominence, when Ultim first came to prominence, that was the card I had the most issue with. Channeling Frigid, I think that card's great. I think that card is awesome for the game. I think it's a great way to enact ice and have you sink resources and to keep it, but also, afflict your opponent for a certain number of turns. I think Frostbites are really interesting. But I think the way the Icelander uses Frostbites and a card like Hypothermia in particular, I think, Ice has been a bit overtuned for this hate kind of aspect as opposed to a disruptive aspect. So, I think it is a bit of a case of overtuned. I think the Ice can be revisited and can continue to be used. I just think they have to be more careful with it. But it is an interesting one. I think, like I said earlier, it's been a bit too flexible. It's been a bit overtuned. I do think that's a bit of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Prodigy, what card effects, stats, mechanics, etc. do you think we would need from outsiders to improve Arachne's performance? Big numbers, more tools to go wide, more sources of silver, another piece of equipment, and or other. And along the same lines, what do you think of the fatigue turtle build that won a ProQuest this season? Bonus, has your team put much time into him in this current state to see what he can do? We all never, I guess we just kind of test whenever a team. I only test with Dan, really, and I can tell you we have not really touched Arachne. It's not something that interests me that much. What would Arachne need? Maybe all of the above. I think the equipment is really interesting and quite powerful. So the silver aspect of it, maybe it needs something else that can produce that. Maybe it just needs more of these same effects, just redundancy, just consistency. I'm honestly really not sure on Arachne. Like, Assassin's probably one of the things I've explored the least because it just hasn't interested me that much. I just didn't think it was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I first saw the hero, I thought that it would be more of a controlling, like, fatigue deck, to be honest. Which could go that route, but that would probably kind of suck.
It's what it has been so far, though. That's what has been doing well in ProQuest, and that isn't very.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it does give a play, like, it does open up that play style, I guess. It just comes down to this question: we think that's like, fatigue as a primary game plan is like by design, or it's just like a byproduct of design. It's not actually the intention. I don't know. I'm also in the same boat where I don't really know with Arachne. For us, like, for when you like ask about testing and stuff, it's like we're not going to be diving into like new heroes and trying to like break things until we know, like, these people are going to the Pro Tour, this is what we're preparing for, here's our schedule, et cetera, et cetera. Other than that, it's like we kind of stick to the decks that we enjoy playing, or we, spend our time in better ways than like diving deep into Arachne. But surely we will, like, at one point we're going to be like, okay, this is our combo deck here, like, can we do something unfair, etc.
I mean, speak for yourself. I'm always doing that. Ask Dan how many jank decks I bring to the table.
I mentally take a break from that stuff.
But we don't play together. That's the other thing I think people forget sometimes. Like, me and Brenda don't actually play together very often.
Yeah,
so
it's like almost never.
Yeah, basically. I hate this guy. No, I'm kidding. Woot for more. What would a balanced version of Starvo look like in the Living Legend format, e.g. Briar or Ada? I don't know what the Living Legend format looks like, to be honest, what it could look like. I think, according to James White and what he said at PTL1, Starvo would be balanced for the Living Legend format, because when they tested Starvo, they were testing it into Chain and, like, unerrated Briar and Plunder Run and stuff. So, it should be balanced fine.
It's a bold-faced lie, by the way. Like it's just such a lie. Like maybe it is not very good against
A million
Plunderon or something
embodiments.
like that. Yeah, sure. Like maybe it's not good against that, but that's not why it was released the way it was. Like it's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Like they had plenty of time after the ban of Plunderon to understand that thing was broken. What it will look like will be. I think the Starvo is actually relatively balanced in the Living Legend format because Prism's there. Prism's going to dunk on Starvo for the most part, and you've got also Chain and stuff like that, which is it's fine. The Starvo.
What if Briar gets unerrated in Living Legend form? Acceptance asks if you were to make a Fab Cube, what heroes would you want to be in it? That was a great question. This is the kind of question I want to hear.
That's a tough question though, because you have to wonder. Yeah, you go.
I've thought about this already because I was thinking about doing this. To be honest, I would not have arcane damage. I think in the first iteration of my cube, I think I would probably look to. I might look at 6 heroes. I might try and follow an Outsiders theme and have 2 so 3 classes, 6 heroes. So I would potentially look at 2 brutes, 2 warriors, and I don't know what the last would be. It might just have to be 2 ninjas, I think.
Yeah. I was thinking a lot about Cube and like how to come up with a Fab Cube that sort of like somewhat reinvented the format in terms of like drafting heroes and like drafting, like using a way to like supplement drafting like heroes and dual classes and talents and things like that, just so you can like actually streamline like the actual cube drafting part and make it kind of more interesting and not feel as on rails. But yeah, I don't know. I've thought about it a lot. Like I got to see my first Fab Cube to believe in it. I got to see.
I might stay away from talents. Is what my kind of first thought is. Just try and because I think you can have. So maybe it was like I said 2 brutes, right? So maybe it's like you have KO in the cube, for instance, but you could maybe even have Livia, but you just have very minimal shadow cards. You can also do creative things where it's like, okay, maybe I have more representation. Like maybe just instead of having one of this card, I have like multiple of this particular card, for instance, which could be interesting as well. Like a Deadwood tracker, a Deadwood Rumble rather. Maybe you have like 3 of each of the color, for instance, to try and balance it out. So I that's kind of how I would look at it. I'd break the rules a little bit. I would maybe look at trying to not have talent. I'd probably look at not arcane damage immediately, and I would go down that route. And that's something I might do when I have some time and I'm not playing much Flesh and Blood. Dante asks, what was the biggest mechanic mistake so far? Yes, any answer other than Spectra is incorrect, and LSS should stay away from ? I mean, it's probably Spectra.
Yeah, it probably is Spectra. So like when they say mechanic, does it have to be like a word like that, or?
Yeah, I mean they're talking about like like a keyword or a mechanic of the game. So
I think the biggest mistake was I mean it's close behind, but like I think Starvo and the idea were like the idea that you like built your deck and it was like reveal beforehand and it was so stupid. Like I just don't know why they thought that was like cool. It was just not Flesh and Blood, right? This idea, you draw your hand, you randomly draw these 4 cards, and you reveal these 3 colors, and like now you have this crazy freaking ability where you dominate +2. It's like, etc. It's just, I thought that was just like really atypical for like what the rest of Flesh and Blood feels like. And
yeah, maybe the answer is just arcane damage.
I don't think so. I don't think so at all.
I just knew it would rile you up.
No, because like if you played Welcome to Wraith, like when you're playing Welcome to Wraith, you're like, if it got super degenerate because of the lack of arcane damage, and like they actually, I mean James is telling us that the reason like Wizard was the counter to Drone of Brutality, but they just banned it anyway.
Also, once you see Viscerai for the first time after playing Welcome to Wraith, you're like, okay, arcane damage is cool, and this makes a lot of sense. Like J Fab asks, looking for Brennan's reaction to Brian Go's recent tweet explaining the necessary role fatigue plays in Fab. Well, we actually did cover this on the latest Patreon pod, but maybe you just give a quick recap because I think you kind of had a positive reaction to basically Brian saying homework this week for everyone complaining about fatigue is to go and play Flesh and Blood, where when you get to the end of your deck, you just reshuffle.
Yeah, so obviously that would be terrible. So like fatigue, like actually running out of cards has like a good function in the game, and it's core to the game. It like helps you appreciate sort of the resources of your cards. But we were specifically talking about, and just because of the way that Twitter is, like there's not much nuance on Twitter, but it's fatigue as a primary game plan, not fatigue existing as a concept. It's decks that just exist to literally only block out, and that is their means to win the game. Like, is that intentional game design, or is it a byproduct of the Flesh and Blood resource system? I would potentially say it's a byproduct because it just it doesn't feel like Flesh and Blood, like just raw fatigue. Because that breaks that concept, right? This idea of that fatigue is forcing you to actually understand, like, your card economy, et cetera, and then fatigue is sort of like this, blind block with all the cards, block as much damage as possible, almost indiscriminately, and have some way to be net higher on cards, so you're running the opponent out at the end. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we did a whole pod about this, so I'm not going to get into it. But suffice to say, I think it's both good and bad fatigue. So, speaking of Mr. Brian Gottlieb asks, what advice do you have for the idiot who writes the ban suspended announcements, Brendan?
I think he's doing a really good job compared to like the previous ones. Like, I don't know, it feels intentional. It feels like
grounded.
It feels grounded. It feels like that, like the person behind it actually cares. Where in the past there was some ban, like at least before Brian went on, actually, like specifically talking about like the shake up the PT2 and like Starvo and stuff. It just felt like that was really out of touch, and it was like, yeah, I don't know about this, but I think it's good. Like, even if like the thing is, like, I do agree with all the bans. I just think that, I actually kind of just do agree with pretty much all of them. It's like maybe Crown of Seeds was,
It's not necessarily the response, right? It's more there's maybe some fundamental underlying things that are leading to the ban suspended needs that need addressing for the future. Like that's where I see it, right? I think the most recent ban suspended and even the previous, I think, were good decisions and they were justified, and the communication to the community was good. I think that needs to continue, by the way. I think that communication to the community about these bans to give the reasoning, despite, sometimes you could say, well, that opens LSS up to criticism because people can start pinpointing things like the Crown of Seeds, the belittle thing. But you know what? That creates discourse and just shows thought process, and I think that's good for the game. Great question there from Mr. Brad Gottlieb. The Tickler Foundry, Marco asks, do you think the math behind Fab's game system can lead to stale game design? The overimportance of value points often makes many cards dead on arrival or immediately impactful. Is there a way to keep this idea fun and fresh without relying on synergistic combo decks or board states? I'm going to answer this one quickly, Brendan, because I think we talked a little bit about this kind of idea of value, and I think the good thing about this game is that synergistic interactions between cards is a big part of this game, and I think that is actually what makes cards not dead on arrival. Like, when we reviewed Dynasty, and you looked at a card like I can't remember what it's called, the Guardian Blessing that costs 1 and gains you 3 life, right? Is it a card where you'd be like, this card is going to see play in this format? No, it's not, right? It's not a card you look at. But because of these Guardian decks that are looking to potentially play this fatigue style or this kind of long game style and gain life to get out of reach, that card is more relevant. And I know we've just talked about fatigue and thoughts on that, but there's cards that, yes, they do look bad, and there's some I think outliers where these cards will never be playable, and some of those are limited cards, and that's fine. I think in supplemental sets, those cards are a bit of a crime if they print cards that are just never going to see play because they're just too underrate and are focused on a value sort of part of the game. But cards that can have synergy, on the other hand, I think are very different. So I think what's more important is that it's not about stale game design, it's about them reflecting on these cards and making sure that there's ways that these cards can have impact in the future. And maybe we're just all wrong and all these cards could have impact in the future, but potions and items from Everfest, I'm looking at you.
I would say yes to the question, like it can. And I think my biggest concern with sort of the value equation of Fab and like these cards being based on is just like the homogenization of some decks. So we saw that with like the belittle decks. Like when you see generic cards make their ways into like all the decks that fall into a certain archetype or sub archetype, I think it gets a little stale because it's kind of hard to come out with like a different version of Wounded Bolt. It's not just also like more broken at doing that exact function, or Snatch or Enlightened Strike, things like that. So it's more just homogenization is the issue for me, but
yeah, okay. The answer, you're right. The answer is yes, but also I think there's so many things that they can do to avoid that it should be a non-issue. Zachary, are there any cards from past sets that haven't had their chance to shine that you think will make a big splash in the CC metagame one day? Push the point and back alley break line stand out to me as cards with a lot of untapped potential. Yeah, push the point, like a 1 resource for 6 damage, and if you could utilize those 2 resources to potentially push even just on rate another 6 damage, you're looking at 3 for 12, right? That's a really good rate. So push the point as a card I think is super interesting. We talked about some cards on last week's pod for Dynasty that we're particularly interested in because of this concept, this idea of what cards could be revisited, could be set for a breakout, so to say. Top 10 cards set for a breakout in Dynasty, Brendan. In Outsiders, which me and Brendan do talk about. any other cards that kind of come to the top of your head that you'd just love one day to just sleeve up and play? Like I think Mind Warp's a really cool card. I would love to see that card be relevant.
Well, they said Push the Point, which was actually heavily played back in Skirmish Season 1 and 2.
Yeah, it was
so
somewhat
I would say
played.
It was played.
So I can give context because I was I think playing this deck when it first came out, because I think Nick Butcher was the first person to put it into his deck on the very last weekend of Skirmish Season 1, I want to say, and then in Skirmish Season 2 it was somewhat played, but it has not seen play since then.
Yeah. I would say Flick Flack. Like, Flick Flack's I could play a long time ago, but Flick Flack's just like, it's an above rate card, and it's just not played right now. Mostly for the context of what decks it would fit into, and then not fitting the archetypes that decks are trying to push. But Flick Flack is, that card is super, super good.
I mean, setup cards are the cards that I look to and want to see. I mean, it couldn't be, it's a bit of a meme at this point, but Unified Decree, I know that's seen a little bit of play with Helmless Sharp Eye, but that's a card that I'm sure.
I think that card
that's powerful,
might
man.
be doomed to always suck.
No, that card's powerful. Fundamentally, that card is powerful. It just needs the...
Might just be asking for too much, though. Yeah.
Maybe. But yeah, I think exactly. There's a lot of cards like that. I think I would be... My personal take is if I went through and looked at some of the more set-up-y cards, those are the cards I would call out. But less, we don't have time. Goka asks, what are your thoughts on your Hyperdriver Hanabi Dash in the post-ban suspended meta? I've really been liking the deck, and I think it will fare well into more aggressive meta, but worry about the deck building cost of having to play below-rate cards like Crankshaft. Do you think something like this is still worth playing over a more traditional aggressive Dash build? Good question. I haven't revisited this deck as much now in the context of the post-ban meta. I think it can go one or two ways. If these Ultim decks really start to rise with Titan's Fist really not making much of an impact over Winter's Wail, and especially these more defensive builds becoming prominent, the deck gets worse, right? It's not a deck that I'm looking to play. But on the other hand, if the meta does get really aggressive, Briar really, really rises, and this is a super aggressive meta, Fire stays relevant, then I think the Hanabi Blaster like Dash is just one of the, like, pound for pound, the damage output that deck puts through is just ridiculous, because you get to play pitchless effectively for most of the game, because the game's only 4 or 5 turns. And you have access to this weapon that's like a free 5 to 10 damage and has evasion on it as well. Like it's pretty crazy. So the Crankshaft thing, it is like slightly underrated, but like you're not using those cards to, like, the way you use those cards in that game plan is you either block with them or you play slightly underrated, but you make it up for the fact that you have all these free resources.
Mm-hmm.
Ticklo Chest, like the Ticklo Foundry Heart is a friggin' ridiculous card. Just tunic every turn. Good. Cup Jake asks, which hero took you the longest to understand? Are there any you still struggle with, Brendan?
No, but Kano did. Just Kano by far. But that's like well established at this point that Kano is just like, it's got a pretty rough skill floor. Like, it takes a while to get there.
There's no heroes you struggle with. No green, broody colored heroes you struggle with.
Yeah, definitely not struggle with Brood. Nah. Brood's fine. Like, no, I mean, definitely not struggle with it. I don't really play it, to be honest. I don't find it particularly enjoyable to play. I don't know why.
I remember one time giving Brendan this Livia deck that I worked on for a very long time and said, you got to play this. It's just really powerful. I was like, he was playing against it, and then he picked it up, played 4 or 5 games. He's like, nah, I'm not playing this.
I was playing it against Chain, so I thought it was bad.
But it was beating
I was back. I don't know. I felt like towards the end of that testing process, we determined it was like not beating it well enough. We're like,
Yeah, Chain was broken. I think same for me. Probably Kano's the one that took the... I mean, it's still an ongoing process of learning Kano, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, the other one is like Dromai. I feel like I still struggle with Dromai because of just... Every time I think that I have a handle on Dromai, I also learn how to beat Dromai more and more, and it just seems to still be weaker and weaker. Like, it's like this whole Guardian versus Dromai debate. It's like every time I'm like, oh wow, Dromai can do this, and then I think of the counter to it, and I'm like, man, that's really disappointing. The more I learn about Dromai, the more I learn how to beat it as well.
Prism definitely had a little bit of a skill for it. Like, I feel like you could play it and it was just like super powerful and you would win games, but to play it optimally, it did. I think it took some thinking.
Mm-hmm. Last question to finish up the pod. Neurotic asks, is Codex of Frailty as crazy value as I think? This is the new card that we've seen so far, the hybrid card from Outsiders. Since you only just because we've got Dynasty only just released, since you only discard a card if you've won, which you never should when you play this, it's like playing your best 0-cost attack, but you also get a Ponder and the opponent gets a Frailty, whatever that is. Leave No Witness was already so strong. Now you also draw a card and get a guarantee they have an arsenal when you play it. I mean, we don't know what Frailty is, right? But even if you just say it's some minor inflict impact on your opponent, how good is Codex of Frailty? I mean, so what Neurotic's saying, right, is like this idea of each hero that gets the effect. So each hero, Codex says each hero puts an attack action card from their graveyard face down to the arsenal, and each hero that does discards a card. So I guess the idea is like you play this off like 1 to 2 card hands or something, or you play this, then you play out the attack afterwards. You basically play this to get an attack into your arsenal that you're then going to play, and then you get a Ponder token, and your opponent would have to, maybe they already have their arsenal full when they just get no effect, or they have to discard a card, so they're not net changing on cards, and you're using this one card for potentially 2 cards. I mean, that's pretty good. Is it crazy broken? I mean, I don't think so, but there's definitely cases where this is going to have a lot of value. I just feel there's also going to be cases where you're like, man, this is a 2 block that I don't want to return anything in particular because I want to use my arsenal a different way, and I'm a ranger.
Yeah, like a card that does nothing sometimes is kind of rough. Like,
poison.
Like, I think about promise of, exactly. No, exactly. You're right. Like that's the exact same thing. It's like, so you think of like Promise of Plenty, which was played. It's just like it refills that arsenal, but it does it off the card itself, right? It doesn't like when you need 2 cards to support the singular function of one. It's like, I don't know. It just it's asking for a lot in Flesh and Blood, to be honest.
Agree. Well, interesting question to pass out on, to finish out on though, with Codex of Frailty and Outsiders coming very, very soon. That is episode 96 of Arsenal Pass, our community questions answered. We had over 40 questions, which we ripped through. Brendan, I think we gave some pretty bad answers and some great answers. So we'll even out to, I would say, some decent answers, all things said and done. Brendan, any last things to say before we close out the pod?
Nope. Nothing to say. Just excited for the Calling Indianapolis is done by the time it's releases, right?
That was last weekend.
Yeah, so by the time when we're recording this, the Calling Indianapolis is coming up very, very soon. So excited to see how that meta shapes up personally and just see where we land in terms of the class constructed.
Yeah, it's crazy to see. Insert name here. Won the Calling.
Yeah.
Good job. Well done. Well played. And with Hero, would you have expected it? All right. If you want to find us on Twitter, he is at Brendan APG. I am at Fian_Dale. A big thank you to all of the Arsenal Pass patrons. You guys are awesome. And until next week, we'll see you in the next one.
See y'all.